Hey, welcome to Rooftop. Good to see you guys. Glad to see you. Merry Christmas. Everybody having a good time? Thanks for coming. You guys having a good time? Merry Christmas. Anybody tried the cookies yet? Anybody tried the cookies? A lot of you are looking at me really weird. You're wondering, do they do this a lot here? Yes. Merry Christmas. Good to see you. Hey, Shoggies. Shoggies over here. Hey, the Ellises. Merry Christmas, everybody. My name is Matt. I'm one of the pastors here at Rooftop. Good to see you. Having a good time? Yeah, come on. Merry Christmas. We're having a good time. Relax. Chill out. So as any royal figure knows, strong entrances are important. How someone enters a room is important because first impressions matter. With a strong entrance, someone can establish authority and introduce themselves as someone who might have something to say. Strong entrances set the tone for everything that is to happen. This is why trumpets play for kings and queens when they enter a room and why they wear their best purple royal vestments. By the way, I can probably take this off right now. Come. Thank you. It's almost like we practiced that. But it's not just kings and queens that know the importance of a strong entrance. The President of the United States understands this. When he enters a room, everyone stands up and hails to the chief. Athletes know the importance of a strong entrance. What happens at the beginning of a football game? Right players spring out of the tunnel, tear through a big banner, stoking the crowd, intimidating the opposition. It's why baseball players strut up to the plate with walk-up songs. And why closing pitchers make big dramatic entrances out of the bullpen. Brides know the importance of a strong entrance when the doors open and she walks down in all her radiance. Musicians and performers know this too. I still remember my high school choir teacher, Mrs. Hauk, yelling at us for making weak entrances when we were supposed to come in at a certain part. Mrs. Hauk said she would rather us start singing with confidence at the wrong time as opposed to singing weakly at the right time. Strong, memorable entrances matter for kings, presidents, athletes, brides, performers, preachers. If you want to make an impression, if you want to take charge of a situation, you got to come in strong. Or at least we would think that. The value of a strong entrance can maybe be overstated. You see, there's this 2,000-year-old story of a king who makes an entrance. He comes into our world as a baby. He arrives from another realm entirely. This royal figure is the most powerful king to ever rule in our world or step foot in our land. His followers call him the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Indeed, this baby king grew up to defeat his enemies of sin and death. Now he reigns robed in righteousness on a throne of glory established in heaven over all the earth. An angelic host gathers about this king constantly with billions of saints worshiping at his feet. But what's interesting about this king is that when he made his royal entrance, it wasn't that impressive. Now, it could have been. He could have queued up the music. He could have donned the purple robe. He could have run through the banner. But this king chose to enter the world in a different way, through the womb of an impoverished teenage girl in a backwater Palestinian village laid in an animal trough. That's how the most powerful figure in the universe made his entrance. Now, of course, I'm talking about Jesus. Jesus is the very Son of God who entered the world 2,000 years ago. On Christmas, we celebrate his arrival to earth. Jesus is God with us. Jesus is God's love and power in human flesh. But I've always been struck by the manner of Jesus' entrance into the world. It was so different from how we would expect the King of Kings to arrive. When our leaders enter rooms, they turn up the volume, they make sure everyone is watching. Not Jesus, not the Son of God. He did it differently. So how did he do it? How did Jesus make his entrance? That's what I want to talk about with you for just a few minutes this afternoon. I want to talk about how Jesus entered the world. And I want to talk about how Jesus entered the world, because understanding how Jesus entered the world is key to understanding who he is. And I want to talk to you about how Jesus made his entrance, because in entering the world the way he did, he invites us to be like him. He invites us to be one of his people who enters the room the way he did. So how did Jesus make his entrance? How did Jesus enter the world? In a few ways. Jesus entered the world in obscurity. Jesus entered the world in poverty. And Jesus entered the world in humility. First, Jesus entered the world in obscurity. Now, normally, when babies are born, it's a big deal. You want everyone to know, new moms and dads are filled with pride. They want to show their new baby off. And so they do. With signs in the front yard, big birth announcements. And the more important the birth, the bigger the story. When Prince Charles was born to Queen Elizabeth, his arrival earned newspaper headlines around the world. People were fascinated by how new baby and mom were doing. Interest hadn't cooled decades later when Prince Charles and Diana gave birth to William, or when William and Kate gave birth to George. All of these were front page events. This obsession over royal births makes sense when you consider that these future kings will someday rule over these citizens. People want to know their king. Which is why it's a little surprising that Jesus, the King of Kings, was actually born into near total obscurity. He was born in Bethlehem, a backwater village that didn't even appear on most maps. His birth wasn't accompanied by news updates or articles. Some angels announced Jesus' birth to this group of shepherds, but they weren't very media savvy, so I don't really know what the marketing plan was there. The king of Jerusalem, Herod, he heard about the birth of Jesus, but that was only because the wise men got kind of turned around and they need to stop by the palace and ask for directions. Otherwise, nobody would have known about the birth of Christ. At the time, practically only a handful of people did. Why would the Son of the Almighty Creator of the universe choose to arrive in such obscure circumstances? Well, because Jesus is not like us. Jesus is not like the kings and politicians we are familiar with who need shouts of acclamation to satisfy their egos. He didn't need a big entrance. Jesus knows who he is. Jesus knows that he's loved by his Father in heaven. That's enough for him. He didn't need the yard sign. It should be enough for us too. You see, after Jesus had grown up and began his teaching ministry, he talked to his followers a lot about serving God quietly without the need for attention or acclaim. Like in the Sermon on the Mount. Be careful not to practice your acts of righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. When you pray, for example, go into your room, close the door, pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Nothing we do for God needs to be seen by others for it to matter. In fact, the fewer people see it, the more it matters to God. Jesus understood this. Even in his birth, he understood that he had an audience of one and that his Father who was unseen would see what he did and reward him for it. Jesus was born into obscurity, and he invites us to live there with him. Jesus entered the world in obscurity. How else did he enter the world? He entered the world in poverty. You probably know that Jesus was a lower class kind of guy. He wasn't necessarily born into destitution, but he was definitely in the lower tax bracket. His father was a tradesman from Nazareth, which is an obscure working class town. He was born in an animal trough. Apparently no one got them the bassinet that was on the registry. And when his parents show up a little bit later at the temple to make an offering for his birth, which good Jewish people were supposed to do back then, Joseph and Mary bring 2 doves, which is actually the poverty rate for people who didn't have a goat or a bull. Jesus entered the world in an impoverished state. Again, this is not how leaders who want to prove their power make an entrance. When an American president travels to foreign countries, he brings all the treasure, all the trappings of our great nation with him to show the rest of the world that you don't want to mess with us. Or when Aladdin wants to woo Jasmine's heart, what does he do? He asks the genie to change him from a common street rat into a royal prince, Prince Ali Ababwa, bedecked with royal clothes and riding an elephant. You might have heard about this guy. You might have heard about Ali Ababwa. He's got 75 golden camels, purple peacocks. He's got like 53. When it comes to exotic type mammals, I'm quoting the song, by the way, for those who don't know. He's got a zoo, I'm telling you, it's a world-class menagerie. If you've not listened to the soundtrack of Aladdin recently. Of course, the strategy doesn't work, and the prince doesn't win Jasmine's heart. She's not impressed. He should have stayed a street rat. Jesus stayed a street rat. This is why he entered the world in poverty, and he stayed there. Why? He wanted us to understand what really matters, and it's not wealth and materialism. Watch out, Jesus says in the Gospel of Luke. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. And he wanted the poor to understand that he represented them and that he understood their plight, so he lived like one of them. He wanted us to be as committed to serving the poor as he was. Even his mother Mary understood this. When she learns that she's pregnant with the Son of God, Mary sings, "He, the future king, has brought down rulers from their thrones, but he has lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, but he has sent the rich away empty." Jesus entered the world in poverty so that we would enter it with him and serve those who live there. That's why we're sending a group down to Mexico in a couple days to build homes for families in Reynosa. They're leaving in 2 days. This is why we collected hundreds of goods for the homeless and for foster kids and the food pantry over the past month. Because we worship a Messiah who entered the world in poverty so that we would live there with him. Jesus entered the world in obscurity and poverty, and lastly, Jesus made his entrance in humility. By in humility, I mean as a child. To be humble means to be lowly, and there is no person more lowly than a baby. As Jesus says, whoever humbles themselves to become like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. To humble yourself like a child is to become innocent, independent, and even powerless. And remember, Jesus didn't have to do it like this. He could have entered the world as a mighty warrior at the head of an angelic army. He could have entered the world as a full-grown man ready to take charge. But he didn't. He came as a dependent. Why? Why would Jesus come to earth as a baby? Well, it's who he is. The God of the universe is the most humble being in existence. So it makes perfect sense that he would enter the world in the most humble form he could take. And he wants, more than anything, to be approachable. He came to get to know us. He came so that we could get to know him. He invites us to draw near. That's what you do when you see a baby. You want to draw near. You want to see. He's not going to hurt us. He's a baby. That's the point. As Hebrews says, since Jesus came to earth as a human being, as a baby, let us approach the throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. I read a book this summer that I've been thinking about lately. I actually read it again I actually read it in high school like 35 years ago, and it left such an impression on me that I went back this summer and reread it 35 years later. The book is a dorky sci-fi book called The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. And the story takes place in the far future on another planet named Winter. It's a very cold place. Winter is visited by an alien representative who goes by the title the Envoy. Now, the Envoy has arrived on the planet Winter to invite its citizens, I know this is super dorky, but to invite its citizens to join the Ecumen, or a galactic federation of more than 80 planets populated by humanoids. By joining the Ecumen, the people of Winter would have access to all sorts of trading opportunities and scientific knowledge. Now, the Ecumen have made this invitation before to all kinds of planets throughout the galaxy, But the visits don't always go that well. Sometimes when the ecumens show up to invite planets into their federation, the people of that planet feel threatened and frightened, which we can understand. We're an alien species to suddenly descend to our own planet from clouds on starships. No matter how much they actually come in peace, planets don't always believe the ecumen, and sometimes they start shooting. Given this, the ecumen eventually settle on a new way of making an entrance. When they discover a new planet, they don't send an army. They don't send a delegation. They send one person, one envoy, with no weapons, no supplies. The envoy is entirely helpless, entirely dependent on that planet to host them. It is their best way to lower defenses. In arriving as a single being with no weapons or army, this envoy builds trust and eliminates fear. It works better, but even still, sometimes the people of that planet feel threatened and kill the envoy anyway. I won't tell you if that happens in this book in case you're a dork like me and you want to read The Left Hand of Darkness. But as I was rereading the book this summer, I thought, this is Christmas. This is the message of Christmas. God could have come down to earth with angel armies and spaceships to convince us that he is real and make us do what he wanted us to do, but he chose a different way. He wants us to relate to him. He wants us to trust him. He wants us to connect with him. He wants us to depend on him, to work with him. So he came down as one man, an envoy, a baby at that, with no armies, no defenses, nothing but his humble self. For the most part, it worked. People felt comfortable around him. Wise men and shepherds approached him. Rich and poor alike followed him. Locals and foreigners trusted and believed him. Not everybody did. Some people still felt threatened, and they killed the envoy anyway. But that was part of the plan. The envoy came to teach us about God and to die for our sins and defeat the power of death. Jesus accomplished that on the cross, and as the King of Kings made his entrance on earth once, so the Bible says he will make his entrance again. But it might be different next time. When he entered the world on Christmas, Jesus arrived in obscurity, poverty, and humility. When he comes back again, all will know, all will see. And when he comes back again, he will not arrive in a manger with hay, but on a throne of gold. And when he makes his return again, he won't come back as a humble child, but a glorious king wielding a sword who will punish the wicked and take home the righteous. That's how Jesus will make that entrance. Today on Christmas, we remember how he made this one in obscurity, poverty, and humility. And he invites us to approach him so that we may know the envoy who arrived to redeem us from our sins.